It is said that travel broadens the mind. I must confess that I'm not well travelled myself. Family and study have got in the way, as well as the big one, money. Almost all of my travelling was done by the age of 9. And there's just one trip from those days that I'd like to tell you about. And it didn't just broaden my mind, it blew my mind. When I was 8, we went on a short trip to the Holy Land. I felt as though the stories I'd learned in Sunday school and at home had come alive. I remember thinking, even if the details of what Jesus did and said were changed, he was definitely in this place doing incredible things. I think Jesus became real for me on that trip. As I was so young, I really only remember specifically a couple of the places that we visited. One of them was the River Jordan, at the site traditionally associated with Jesus' baptism. We were allowed to take our shoes and socks off and paddle in the water, but everyone was told they mustn't go any deeper. I was stood on a little concrete ramp which went into the water, and I sat down carefully, but as I stepped down, I slipped on some seaweed or something and fell completely under the water. It was absolutely fine, and I was actually wearing a swimming costume. I imagine I probably walked around annoying people by thinking I was very unusual. What I didn't appreciate then was, of course, that being under the water in the Jordan wasn't what connected me with Jesus. It was my baptism as a baby. My mum always calls this the time I was accidentally baptised. A few weeks ago, Stephen mentioned about thin places where heaven seems just a bit nearer. My own experience of thin places, including the Jordan, they have a very special feeling to them, though visually they will be quite different. As Jesus is baptised, the heavens open and God announces that Jesus is God's beloved Son. The veil between heaven and earth is not just thin, it has been drawn temporarily aside. As I have said before, John the Baptist and the onlookers that the passage implies that there must have been really shocked, amazed, perhaps even a little scared. When I try to imagine it, I hit a bit of a wall as I realise that I'm actually just remembering those classical paintings of light coming down from the sky and what looks like a pigeon dive-bombing Jesus. Don't think it probably happened quite like that. The baptism of Jesus has inspired many artists over the centuries, and yet can a painting truly capture the feeling of heaven being open, or the sound of God's voice? Jesus' baptism holds a place alongside the transfiguration and the resurrection, because these are heavenly moments. They go beyond our earthly experience. Yesterday we had Twinkle Tots, our toddler church. It was very busy, and amongst the soft play and painting, we had some worship time learning about Jesus' baptism. With the help of our volunteers, we recreated Jesus' baptism using a ball pool for the River Jordan, and the children had a go at christening some dolls. I think Dave was slightly alarmed at how forcefully some of these dolls were being dunked into the water, but I think the children enjoyed it. The baptism of Jesus is one of these special moments in the gospel where there's no secrecy or double meanings or lots of backstory to understand. The message from heaven that has been written about extensively over 2 millennia, and yet it can be grasped by a toddler. Yesterday, the children were saying, This is my child. I love him. He makes me very happy. It is regarded as the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And so it follows that for us, baptism marks the beginning of our life as Christians. The promises made at baptism are significant. As much as my mum's joke is funny, there can be no such thing as an accidental baptism. Baptism is intentional. I regularly see families coming for baptism who, despite not normally having any contact with church, want their child to know that God loves them. They want to give thanks for the new life that's in their midst. Or they want to have a fresh start as a family. Let's be honest, in this day and age, if they just wanted a party, they could have one. We are so blessed that people still want church to be part of a significant time in their lives, and so we should celebrate that intention. All those who are baptised, whether they set foot in church again or not, are forever linked with Jesus and his baptism. Whether we are baptised 10 minutes ago or even 100 years ago, we still walk around with that invisible sign of the cross on our foreheads. Jesus' baptism marks him out as unique, God's own, the beloved, in whom God delights. When we are united with Jesus in baptism, whether we actually hear those words thundering from heaven or not, the same is true for us. We are God's own. We are loved. And God delights in each one of us. But can we dare to believe it? We live in a world with a chronic lack of self-esteem. The pressure to look perfect, be self-sufficient, independent, young, hard-working, intelligent, rich, famous, able. The pressure to be all of those things is everywhere. We see impossible standards sold to us as the norm. But when we become Christians, we have the benefit of being freed of this agenda because we have God's instead. Just as Jesus' baptism marks the beginning of Jesus' mission, so our baptisms mark the beginning of God's work in us. As I said, there are no accidental baptisms. God did not happen across you. You are God's own. God loves you and delights in you for who you are now. Even if we don't feel confident in ourselves, we can trust that God is not worried about the things we can and can't do. God sees the beauty in all of us. And God is always with us. What good news is that? Baptism doesn't expire or wear out. It doesn't need to be renewed, although it can be. And it definitely isn't accidental. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism. Just one. And each one recalls that moment where heaven was open, and that cannot be undone by us or our mistakes and failures. In recognition of this incredible gift, we need to live like baptized people. This may mean turning away from things which keep us separated from God. This may mean freeing ourselves of how others see us and be more attentive to how God sees us. It might just mean that we don't give up on God, because baptism makes explicit the fact that God will never give up on us. Being baptized is the beginning of a lifelong walk with God. And all the time, God holds our hand and whispers in our ear, "You are my own. You are loved, and I delight in you." Amen.